Welcome to Civilian Carry Radio, a proud member of the Firearms Radio Network. This show is brought to you by our sponsor tonight, Big Tex Outdoors. Big Tex Outdoors mainly focuses high-quality tactical EDC gear. They offer 100% risk-free shopping. That means if you change your mind for any reason, they'll refund the full purchase price, shipping cost, and pay for return shipping. So total risk-free shopping, folks. On top of that, their orders ship in 24 hours or less. Some of their items ship for as little as $1.99. They're an FFL and Class 3 SOT, so they sell suppressors, SBRs, and other NFA items. Check out their website, Big Tex Outdoors, and please use the code CC Radio for a 15% discount at checkout. And remember, folks, risk-free shopping. Our goal and focus of this podcast is to spread the message to everyday people, the importance of the Second Amendment, firearms safety, education, training, and mindset. Remember, you and only you are responsible for the safety and protection of yourself and your loved ones. Our mission statement: gun ownership is your right, safety and education are your responsibility. We have 3 rules on our podcast, folks. 1 is no cussing, 2 is no drinking, and 3 is no politics, because gun rights and the right to self-protection is a God-given natural right. I'm your host and producer, Baraka James, along with my co-hosts, Alan Sams and Tatiana. Good evening, Alan. Good evening, Tatiana. How are you?
Great.
Doing great. Great to be here.
Awesome. And we are always happy that you are here with us. Folks, Tatiana is also the director of training at A Girl and a Gun's Women's Shooting League. Check that out at www.agirlandagun.org. And we have 3 esteemed guest co-hosts this evening. First up, Mr. Wayne Dobbs of Hard Tactical Wired Shooting. Good evening, Wayne. How are you?
Doing well.
We are honored to have you here. Next up, we have Mr. Lee Weems, LEO, Chief Deputy and owner of First Person Safety. Good evening, Lee. How are you?
Good evening, and that was hard tactical wired shooting. Yeah, is that...
we'll give him a pass.
And next up is our guest co-host Daryl Bulkey of Hardwired Tactical Shooting.
There you go.
DB's Shooting Adventures. Good evening, DB. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Now that I've gotten past the grammatical spelling and pronunciation Nazi, aka Lee Weems. I love you, Lee. We are listener-funded radio, and the listeners make the program possible. You can contribute to the show via Patreon for $1 or as much as you like by going to www.patreon.com/CC Radio or clicking the link here in our show notes. A huge shout out to our $10 Patreon pledges, Mark B. and Young Pei Chang. Our $5 Patreon pledges, Christopher D., Rob J., CJ, James W., RS, Russ, Ira S., Rob C., Michael G., Eric B., Mark E., ATI Guns, John W., Onsite Firearms, Scott D., Kirk C., David Y., FPF Training, William T., and Greg G. We want to say a huge thank you to the people who are currently pledging via Patreon. Your support to contribute to the education of people, the importance of the Second Amendment, firearms education, mindset, safety, and training. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and guests and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or Civilian Carry Radio and or their employees. Viewer discretion is advised, especially on live shows. A message from our platforms that currently we utilize to provide the show to you. A friendly heads up: platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and ISPs are currently seeing unprecedented levels due to COVID-19. As a result, they're having more issues than usual that may affect sound quality and latent connections. So please bear with us, folks. Tonight's topic: realities of police training, part 3. Our guests tonight are Wayne Dobbs, Daryl Bulkey, and Lee Williams. And from that, I pass it on to you, Alan.
So, one of the questions we're going to use to get this thing started, again, this show we're going to try to focus mainly on firearms and training as it pertains to law enforcement officers. And maybe one of the a good place to start would be to maybe have you guys give us a list of some things that maybe the general public or the average citizen doesn't understand or realize about either the role of firearms or the training or, the skill level associated, anything like that the general public doesn't realize about police officers.
Who's
Who
going
do you
first?
want first?
Well, it's your show, Daryl. We'll start with you.
Okay, to start, it's horrible. The general public has been fed a line by police executives and politicians that somehow, and television, movies, news media, everything else, it is in general, police firearms training is fairly abysmal, and it's getting worse rather than better. They just keep lowering the bar as to what state minimums are and what minimum standards are. And if you think about the public, is getting told that, you know, these are well trained and da da da. They've established minimal standards, and with all the cuts to budgets, manpower, this, that, and the other thing, the first thing that goes is usually police firearms training. And most, not all, most agencies are doing the least amount as humanly possible to train their officers, and to a standard that is constantly, the bar keeps lowering. I'm not going to steal the Wayne Dobbs line for him because I'm sure he'll use it himself to describe it in here in a minute. But it's a sad state of affairs, and we are doing stuff that is it causes most of the problems we see with lethal force. And the general opinion of politicians is the more firearms training we take away from police, the more minimal we do, the less officers will use force and use lethal force, and they could not be farther from reality. So I'll kind of leave it at that because I'm sure we'll dive into some details here in a minute, and I'll pass it off to Lee or Wayne.
Lee.
Okay, I think to kind of put it in perspective that many of our listeners would probably understand, probably the average level of skill from peace officers nationwide is probably about IDPA marksman. And a good shooter in an agency may be a sharpshooter. I think that's probably good baseline equivalences for you to draw. And, you know, the Georgia standard, I've mentioned it on the show previously, is so ridiculous. You could shoot in January of 1 year, and it's a 30-round course. It's got 220 points at the 3 and the 7 yard line. It takes 240 points to qualify. Only there's 4 shots at 15 and 4 shots at 25, and everything else is 7 and in. You could miss the entire target, 6 times and still qualify. Hit nothing but the berm 6 times, or the ground in front of the berm, and still qualify. And you could do that in January of 1 year and not draw your gun out of a holster again until December of the following year, because our standard is once per calendar year, not once per 12 months. It's once per calendar year. So as long as you got your qualification, say sometime in 2019, you were good till December 31st of 2020. That's the state minimum standard. Now, obviously, an agency can set a higher standard than that, but that is the state minimum standard. We did just have a positive change announced in Georgia that's really not going to affect the nuts and bolts of firearms training so much, but now it's going to be a requirement to also be a certified use of force instructor to teach firearms or defensive tactics or driving. That goes into effect by 2022. All of those aforementioned areas must be conducted in the presence of a certified use of force trainer. And by 2024, in order to teach any of those subjects, you will have to be also a certified use of force trainer. And so what the standard is going to be now is a candidate to instruct will have to go through the state's 80-hour just general instructor course, followed by an approved 80-hour use of force instructor course. All this prior to going to a firearms instructor course, driving instructor course, or DT tactics instructor course. And then just to back up one thing Daryl said about going to minimal, I think a bigger area in that is the lack of honest to goodness good defensive tactics training. And that's actually leading to a greater propensity to use firearms where maybe they might not necessarily be needed.
Yeah.
Wayne?
There's so much ground we can cover here. And I run across the public perception that police officers are well trained, and very capable with firearms, and some of them are, but it's the exception and not the rule. Probably 5% of them that you would encounter out there are truly extremely competent, and that you can more or less count on their performance being adequate, if not excellent, for any challenges that are put in front of them. But most of them are products of a tsunami of mediocrity that's sweeping over policing and police training in the United States right now. I call their firearms training no cop left behind firearms training. It's not training as a general rule. Probably 90% of the time there is no training taking place. They're simply shooting what they call a qualification, which is also a misnomer and a straight out lie to everybody involved. There's no qualification involved. It's a simple marksmanship assessment with extremely low standards as far as accuracy and precision. It's also conducted at ranges and under time frames that are too easy on a target that is generally literally as big as a door sometimes, where if you clip that target anywhere, you're going to gain some kind of credit for it. You're going to get points. So what we've done is we've defined mediocrity as the new excellence across the law enforcement culture, and it's circling back on us now. It's probably been, and Daryl and Lee, you can probably say it, but I'm going to say that we can go back to the mid '90s and landmark it or benchmark it at about that point and start bringing it forward as to where it's a practice, a culture, an expectation. Daryl and I run our classes on a law enforcement range in the Dallas area. It's on the Dallas Pistol Club facilities, and it's the facility of a department in that area, and we have access to it. And it has in front of the target line a stack of, what is it, Daryl, four railroad ties running in a line?
4 or 5, something like that.
And it comes up to the bottom of a qualification target frame. And they're basically there to keep the target frames from getting shot up down there at the base where they turn on the action target turners. And when you look at them, when I have people out there, we always show people just literally thousands of bullet holes in those railroad ties. And we explain to them, this is what's going on when these guys are shooting their so-called qualification, not under any real-world stress. Perhaps some test anxiety going on, but as far as actual stress or threat, there is none, and they are literally missing whole target frames. And so we basically, I come with the advice to private citizens that if you're ever anywhere and you see the police show up with their guns out, that is an excellent time to leave, to flee. Because if they start shooting, it's really up in the air as to who's going to get shot.
T, got a question?
So my question, Wayne, you touched on this a little bit. My question was, where did we start seeing this change and shift away? Is it, and you mentioned the mid 90s, and it's interesting as somebody who's relatively new, you've spent your whole careers in this, guys. As someone who's new to this experience within the past decade, I can kind of see the changes in the people that I work with categorically from 70s, the 70s, those guys are still hanging on, to the 80s, right? And there's some pretty distinctive behaviors and techniques. And then the 90s and then 2000s and then post, shock and awe campaign, there's really big waves of trends that have come through. And what's happened in the civilian sector as a result of those influences versus what I've kind of observed in the law enforcement community, seems like the civilian culture and firearms knowledge kind of went boom really quick. And then we saw it fall through the floor within the law enforcement community. Can you speak a little bit to that? What created
if you want,
that
I'll start
bubble?
on this. So my observation I came up with, I was kind of thinking on some of this the other day, and it's a general change in what we're hiring for police officers. So I was in 1988. I got hired basically in 87. I was the first person at my agency, which was a fairly good size, well-respected agency in Southern California, so metropolitan area. I was the first officer recruited off a college campus. And I happened to know the recruiter because I just sold them a ton of guns for their SWAT team because I worked at a police equipment place as my college job. So I was sort of a bit of a known entity, but I was the first one specifically recruited off a college campus. And during the course of my career, I saw that the changes from going to how we're recruiting for your ability to be basically a tough person to educated pieces of paper, and that it's kind of a change. And one of the things I noted is we're kind of doing 1968 all over again right now, with changes in politics and society and things like that. And the saving grace to that, most people don't remember how bad crime was in the 70s. But if you go back and look at places like New York and Los Angeles in the 70s, it was absolutely horrific, particularly New York. And you go back and you look at the cops in that era, those were mostly Vietnam veteran officers who were being supervised by World War II and Korean veteran officers of the greatest generation. If you take a look at somebody like Pat Rogers, for example, Pat had just come back from Vietnam and was being supervised by a bunch of guys who fought in World War II in Korea. And that's kind of how they got through those eras with not a lot of cops and horrific street crime, is you had some pretty tough guys. When I started, most of my supervisors, now we had a couple of those greatest generation guys left, but most of my supervisors and people I was around, or mentors or training officers, were all Vietnam era vets. And they're kind of a different group. They're not from the recruited off of college. They were basically recruited out of the military with combative experience. Fast forward to what we have right now and look at what we try to recruit for cops. I mean, a lot of agencies do not want guys who've deployed overseas because they've got them so scared off with, some apparent PTSD thing or something. That's not who they're going after. Who, by the way, were my favorite trainees. If I could get a trainee who was out of the military, and particularly if they deployed, were the best thing we have going for what we should be making police officers out of, but they're not what they're chasing. We're sort of chasing on the recruitment side a diploma, a squeaky clean background record, which means they haven't done anything. And, preferably living at home, because that makes the background much easier. And no particular life and job experience. You also look at the generation of cops we're hiring. Again, never been in a car without a seatbelt, never been in a fist fight, never played a team contact sport, never seen firsthand violence, never been around gang members, thugs, bad people. They have very limited exposure. And the other thing they haven't been around a lot is guns. That was sort of an accepted thing back in the, Wayne's era, mine era, and even into probably Lee's, and Lee's mainly because of where he's located at. Cops were expected to have a firearms background before you even started. I remember when I started, most of the cars in the parking lot had NRA stickers in the window. That was certainly not the case now. So it's a different kind of person we're hiring, and it's a different world in which the firearms equation is not a big part of it.
I have something I'd like to throw in here, and I'm not going to talk about guns. I'm not going to talk about police or police firearms training. I'm going to talk about a cultural phenomenon that I started noticing in 1990. I have a son that was born in 83, and I have a daughter born in 86. So about the time that my son was old enough, say 7 years old, to play soccer, in the city leagues, he started playing soccer, and he was on a very mediocre team. They had one or two kids that carried the whole load for everybody else. And at the end of the season, they said, okay, we're going to meet at CC's Pizza or some pizza place. And they line up everybody and they eat pizza and they hand every kid a trophy. And I remember asking the coach, I said, what are those trophies for? He says, oh, well, we give every kid a trophy because we want them, we want them to feel good about themselves. And I said, so basically you have a mediocre set of kids here doing a very mediocre performance, and you're giving them a trophy that creates an attitude or a belief that they're really doing well. and he was horrified at me being so blunt. But that's essentially what we're doing right there. That's a snapshot of the culture shift that took place with regard to everybody's a winner. Well, everybody's not a winner. And we have a bunch of we have some good cops. I'm not going to say that, but they're not the norm. The excellent cops are not the norm, and they're going away rapidly, and the upheaval we're going through right now is going to flush all of them out. Most of those guys are going to be done. But we have to, if we're going to save this, instead of lowering standards, instead of creating a mediocrity / excellence culture, I think what we need to do is raise standards and raise them dramatically. And I think the way that we can do that is these guys that are going to be leaving these metro agencies are going to be looking for jobs. And I think the suburbs and rural towns can make a harvest of them. And I especially think that we're right here at the golden moment to say, yeah, we want to hire you, but here's what you got to be able to do. And because I think there's going to be, for a while, a decent pool of applicants, if assuming these guys want to stay in police work somewhere.
Hey, real quick, a shout out from Michael Caldera to you, DB. Also, Alan, did you want to take Marlene's question before we move forward?
Sure. Yeah, it's not really gun related, but it is something that I think a lot of people are wondering right now. Marlene, oh shoot, I lost it. There he goes. Marlene L wants to know, what is the best way to help a police officer that is getting seriously injured by a bad actor out in public? Or is that something to do? Bueller?
Lee, this is your cup of tea, buddy.
Repeat the question, please.
What is the best way to?
I was reading something else.
What is the best way to help an officer that is getting seriously injured by a bad actor out in public?
Well, it's interesting that question comes up because just before we got on the air tonight, I watched a video that took place in a Kroger. I don't know what city it took place in. The only caption was that a Kroger on East 10th Street, in which an officer was involved in a very long, drawn-out physical confrontation with a suspect. The suspect was much taller than the officer, and the officer's only effective tool was the taser, and it was only effective to a certain degree. He was getting manhandled, pushed around by this bigger guy, ultimately got position on him and took him to the ground. But then it was repeated drive stuns, and he fired both cartridges from his, I think it's the X2 taser, into the guy. And ultimately, the guy managed to get his taser away before bystanders stepped in to help. Now, there was one bystander that walked up that was trying to tell the suspect, hey, look, dude, you're just making this tougher on yourself. Just do what he says. You're making it harder on yourself. And it was not until he got the taser away that probably a dozen people were watching before they intervened on behalf of the officer. I think that's going to be a moral question for each individual person. If I had seen that, I would have had to have jumped in right from the start, as I think everybody on this panel would. Most of our listeners would be.
Go
ahead, Mike.
We would jump in, but I think what she was wanting to know is how do you do it? What do you do? And the first thing that if I was going to jump in and help an officer in a fight is ask him if he wants help. In other words, can I help you out, officer? And to where everybody hears whose side you're on and you're announcing to him, that what you're doing. Also, if it's just a rolling around fight, it's what can I do for you? What do you want me to do? How can I help you? If it's a deadly force deal and you got the capability, you probably need to let the officer know I'm about to shoot this dude so he doesn't, draw and shoot you, thinking that you're a confederate of the person. But typically what you're seeing people jump in on is physical fights. There are some other exceptions. I mean, there was a guy that saved an Arizona DPS trooper, I think it was year before last, on I-10. The guy was beating the officer, if I'm not mistaken, was trying to take his gun, and this guy stopped and shot the guy and killed him and saved the trooper. There's other ones. There's one in Texas from like the mid 1970s. Trooper got killed, but a guy with his son sitting in a roadside park taking a rest, coming back from a deer hunting trip, watched this trooper get his gun snatched, and the guy shot him, and the guy slipped a .243 Winchester out of his case and rested over the top of the car and zapped that guy.
There was a case in Louisiana last year, or the year before last, where a motor unit that was escorting a funeral procession ended up getting in a fight with a guy in an Advance Auto Parts store parking lot, and some old codger saw it happening and said, "Nah, not with me standing here," and I walked up and screwed a 45 into the bad guy's ear and laid waste to him. And, that was the end of that one. I think Wayne's making an excellent point of going up and saying, "Hey, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do?" And it might be, whatever you can do, grab and help, anything at that point. At that point, maybe just pinning down legs, pinning down an arm or a leg, something that would give the officer a chance to get some sort of advantage would probably be the best thing that you could do that would be of minimal risk to yourself. But I do like Wayne's point there of asking what the officer wants you to do. Daryl?
Yeah, I'm agreement. Just ask the officer what they need, and they'll probably tell you. And if they're incapable of telling you, then you probably need to up that game into you're starting to get into a deadly force situation.
One other thing to think of is maybe getting on the phone to 911. Hey, you have an officer that's in trouble here, or grabbing the officer's radio and calling for help.
Yeah,
Tatiana.
Is there a question that we can field from here? Or, we wanted to talk specifically about firearms training tonight, so I want to circle back on that. What are you seeing as positive things? Are there any positive things we can call to light about programs that are being implemented, things that cadets are looking for? Is there any positive? I don't want to tear it completely to pieces, because there's got to be some golden glimmers here and there. Anybody got any of those?
Yeah, I do. For one thing, I think all three of us can agree that over the long haul of looking at this, and our span goes back a ways. My span is 40 years in this now. Is that safety-related training and practices have made pretty significant strides. We're still having negligent discharges and hurting and killing officers and once in a while a citizen, but by and large, the safety training has made quite a bit of progress. We have available to us quite a bit of knowledge base about how to teach, what to teach to people to make them successful with pistol and rifle and shotgun. The problem is, Tatiana, we're not doing enough of it. It's like saying, hey, I want to be a great golfer. I want to be a great golfer in the crunch, in the clutch. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go play golf today. And then a year down the line, I'm going to play in a tournament and see how I do. It is exactly that. Great golfers. If any of you guys ever been around a solid golfer, what are they always doing? Even if they're not on the golf course, they're practicing a swing or they have a putting surface in their house. They're always doing something to make sure their game is sharp. And we're not doing that with firearms. I proposed it a couple of times. I have a kind of a framework that I thought about that can be done dry in a station, and just say, hey, what we need to be doing with these guys is every 2 or 3 days, they need to come in and practice arrest and control tactics dry. They need to practice firearms dry. They get plenty of practice driving, so that's not an issue. But there's some skills that are really critical that don't come up as often as a lot of people think they do. So these folks are not in any way prepared for it because they haven't built that network in the brain to run those tasks reflexively.
Hey, real quick, y'all. Young Pei Chang has a question. I'm sorry, Alan. I didn't mean to, brother. How effective do you believe citizen police academies are when it comes to community outreach and recruiting? Also, youth explorer programs along the same lines.
I think they're fantastic. If you want to know the truth, I mean, citizens academies get people to kind of see what's really, it gives them an input into the departments on what's going on. The Explorer and Cadet programs are always a good recruitment tool. because you're getting kids who are sort of interested right from the beginning, and they can get a bit more immersed into a culture, particularly if they come from a home culture that doesn't have a police culture within it, if that makes sense. You talk to Irish kids from New York back in the day, everybody had family members who were cops. But we're trying to be more diverse now and get people from multiple different types of cultural backgrounds. Well, a lot of those backgrounds have no police culture in them.
That's
so
true.
That becomes sort of an issue. So those explore programs, those citizen outreach programs, and getting people to come into the departments, I think, are good.
The CPA process is excellent, and I taught in hours for the last 5 years before I retired, and it was great to see who you were really working for, because policing, you tend to get into an insular mindset of it's us versus them, and then you have the police and everybody else. And once you get into CPA and start taking part in that, you see that you work for a bunch of great people. There is something that a lot of places don't do, though, and they really should consider it with CPA, and that is a lot of them invite supporters, people that are friends, network people, network of network people. And so you get, you kind of get the church choir that you're preaching to. And I always threw out, hey, we need to invite some people to every class that don't like us. We need to go out there and find, the community activist that's against the police or that's talking trash on us, and put them in there in the room with us and spend some time, breaking bread, talking about situations, teaching classes. And I submit that a bunch of those people, and I'm not talking about if they're criminals or something like that, but I'm talking about people that have an honest difference of opinion. I think you can change the needle a little bit on some of those folks.
Any positive non-enforcement contact you can have with the populace is a very positive, has very positive results for your agency. One, just who's in the jury pool? Is the citizens. Number two is, as Wayne was saying, it reminds your officers or your personnel that this is who they work for, and that there are good people that are out in the community, and that everyone you're not dealing with is the same person you've arrested 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big thing to keep people tied into the community. And, we stress that tremendously at our agency, sort of to go on what Wayne was just talking about. And I think I mentioned this on the previous episode I was on, where we invited a group to come in to participate in some use of force training. And they've become some of our biggest advocates out into the public, discussing the things. It was mainly because they just didn't know. And
it's
they got
interesting.
their eyes open.
Yeah. It's interesting to put citizens through SIMS training or simulator training or something like that, especially the folks that are against you, because every one of us, I think, has seen it. You will see those folks that are against you using firearms or against you using force or against the police, period. You'll put them in those circumstances, and 100% of the time, you will have horrible, illegal, outrageous, aggravated assault / murder type performances out of them. It is hideous.
And you should see the look on their faces when you say, if you actually did that, you'd be going to prison right now, don't you?
Yeah.
Like you would have gotten handcuffed on this scene. It's just, it's the amazing, just the color drains out of their face. Like, wait a minute, what? Yeah, just because that guy wouldn't give you his driver's license was not a reason to stick a gun in his temple. You may have wanted to, but it's not legal.
Yeah.
Hey, can I circle back to something real quick? Tatiana's question on what's positive, and I wanted to kind of circle back on that real quick, because we all tend to be kind of negative on the whole thing, and there is some positives out there. I tell a lot of officers I talk to, and I try to mentor as much as I can, and still stay in touch with the younger officers that we have some influence with. This is really simple. It's going to be insulting to a lot of police executives out there, and I really don't care. The brass doesn't care if you get killed as a cop. There's no negative in it for them.
I'm going to have to interrupt right there and just vehemently.
You're not who I'm talking about. You're not who I'm talking about.
But see, Daryl, this goes to what we were talking about in the pre-show, though. The difference between big city police and small town sheriff.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm talking about.
I've buried a deputy, and I object to that. I object to that wholeheartedly.
let me finish. The attitude that we can just do bare minimums for these officers, minimal standards, minimal everything, is pervasive, and the way to the top in most large agencies is not through the range. They don't really see a negative to not providing exceptionally good lethal force, deadly force training. It's not a priority and stuff. Now, the positive to this is they are not going to give you the training you need in many cases. Lee's Place is an exception. When I was running a range program, when Wayne was running a range program, we committed, most of us committed career suicide to run productive training programs.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of places all the money is coming out and the priority is coming out of the range programs. When you're on, go sit in a big city range facility. They make it exceptionally safe for the range officers. They're cycling people as fast as they can through on a no cop left behind program. I'm talking about large agencies here. The good thing out there is when Wayne started, when I started, you know what there wasn't out there? A whole lot of opportunity to get exceptionally good training and private training for the officers who are not leaving it up to the minimal training standards. You can go out now as a young police officer and find exceptionally good technical shooting training that we never had available to us. I mean, it pretty much, if you could pony up and get there, you could go to gun sight. If you were on the opposite coast, you might be able to get out to Range Master. Some of the programs with maybe Chapman back then, some of these older, Clint Smith, those guys, but that was it. There wasn't a lot out there, where now it's not hard to find good, exceptional technical shooting people to help train you where your department is failing to provide that training. And, there's a lot of it is ego driven, is officers don't want to admit to themselves that what they're getting from work is not very good. Is, they sell them, this is great training. It's not. They can't hit a bag of anything. And we're telling them that that's acceptable. My whole career, you know what I never wore? I never wore low bid body armor. I never accepted low bid training, and I did most of it myself because it wasn't provided. What I tried to do was pay that back, but believe me, trying to get a good, solid range program in a major police agency is a effort in slamming your head against the wall, because it's expensive and it's time consuming. And you're going to hurt people's feelings, because we are gearing most training to getting the bottom 10%, to make the bottom 10% of a department be able to qualify, rather than getting rid of the bottom 10% and trying to get the middle 80% to try to excel like the top 10%, who are handling most of the most difficult problems well. And so it's just a training attitude.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up before you roll back to this, was who is, I think we've all, of course you guys have, but Barack and I, and I'm sure T, we've all shot these, like Barack and I have shot Virginia State Police and all these other qualifications. And to us, people that are serious, take our training serious and have paid a lot of money to go to a lot of, it's comical to us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Really
because
easy.
it's really stuff that's I don't know. It's just not the slightest bit difficult from what, people like you guys that we pay to go train with have put us through and made us become inoculated to where it's the norm. You know what I mean? So I guess my question is, who can change it? Who can raise these bars when it comes to firearms qualifications? And I feel like if you're a law enforcement officer, you're kind of like the kid that's raise their hand at the end of school on Friday and say, "Hey, you forgot to give us homework." I feel like that's
a
the way you'll
good
be looked at.
analogy.
But
You get beat up on the playground afterwards.
Oh,
for that
yeah,
one.
yeah,
definitely.
I mean, so who is it that sets these qualifications? Why don't they know they're so low? Or is it just a fact? Is it just the fact that you can't be as picky? It's just like my industry right now. We need people. There's not enough people. Some days you just need a warm body to fill a hole more than you need anything else. So is it that we need do we need the qualifications low to fill the spot? Or is it somebody that just doesn't know that these qualifications are laughable to a civilian that doesn't go out every day like you guys do? I
It's a
don't
mix of both of
understand.
those. It's a mix of all that together. One, trying to keep positions filled. Uh, Earlier, we was asked about the diminishing standards.
Mhm.
As I said earlier, right now the current standard in Georgia is 4 shots from the 25. When I went through the police academy in 1999, it was 6 shots from the 25, and we had 18 from the 15 compared to 4 to the 15 now. My sheriff went to the police academy in 1978, and they shot out to 50 yards.
50 yards.
You actually,
Wow.
you
50
actually,
yards.
50
you actually had to know
yards?
how to lob that 38 wad cutter from 50, so mortar shot would come
Wow.
in and hit the target. And that's just how
Yep.
quickly it's changed over the years. And the job of an academy is to graduate cadets. It should be to weed out people in part that shouldn't be in the business. But when you get a regional academy like I attended, you get if they fail some sheriff or chief's cadet, then they got to explain that. And it's easier for the academies just to say, well, they met the minimum standard. The agency can deal with them and decide whether or not to get with them. But then the agency says, we've got so much invested in them because we paid them for all this time. We want to give them other chances and keep them rolling out on them.
And
Go ahead, Wayne.
well, I was going to say you got four arenas where you can weed somebody out from the job, and very few places use them like they say they will. They're worried about a warm body in a slot, and I understand staffing challenges. You have the opportunity during background to get rid of them. You have the opportunity during an academy to get rid of them. You have an opportunity during field training to get rid of them, and virtually every agency has a probationary period after field training that you have a chance to get rid of them there. But that is a tough sled. You don't see a lot of people getting run off as they should. And so what you end up with is another mediocre performer. And if your luck is really bad, you end up with a mediocre performer that wants to make a command rank at some point as soon as possible. So he takes his mediocrity with him.
Like I said, right to the top is not through the range. It's not that important to many people. And it comes down to its money and priorities. If the priority was, and getting back to kind of where Lee and I were having a little tiff there, the reality is it comes down to leadership, not supervision, leadership. A true leader is wholly pinpoint, laser focused on their priority is properly training their subordinates. That is one of the most distinct things that separates leaders from supervisors and managers. And we are horrifically lacking in leadership and law enforcement. Now, are they out there? Absolutely. I can rattle off some names of captains, lieutenants, police chiefs who are fabulous leaders. Most of them have been run out of the business, but they are out there. So it doesn't apply to them. But you look at, when you're watching the news these days, look at some of these chiefs of police that you're seeing in these places and ask yourself, is their priority that my officers are fully capable not only of getting themselves home at every night, but are they really capable of protecting the public as a priority and to take care of business? They're not. They are wholly incapable of it, and they are not people who understand that violence is part of the job. And actually, confidence is a big thing. So one of the big things that happens is ego is a big fat liar. And most of us have found, and I'm sure I can speak for myself, Wayne and Lee, is that we have had to crush our little precious egos to get better. And we have had to go to training classes where we got spanked. We have had to go to places where we didn't look good. And we have gone out and thrown ourselves out into shooting classes or force classes where we had to flush our little egos down the toilet to get ourselves better. A lot of these agencies are filling their officers' heads up with the idea that they are competently trained, and they get into these situations in the field where all of a sudden they realize it's a big fat lie and they're wholly incapable of the task at hand. That I could just throw some rounds at a one-dimensional paper target under impossibly blue skies and puffy white clouds, and can barely hit a target the size of a door. And now you're out in the field and somebody's shooting at you, and it's not an easy solution in a dynamic situation. And we are just not doing a very good job as a society, particularly in metropolitan America. And I think next show, Lee and I have talked, we're going to start delving into the differences between metropolitan and rural America. But I can speak firsthand from metropolitan America, as we are doing a horrific job of preparing officers for the realities of a very violent society that is getting more violent. And it's coming down to a lot of you're on their own. And it becomes imperative, sadly, that police officers, to be really good, are expected to go out and do it themselves. In the United States military, we don't tell fighter pilots, hey, we got kind of a minimal standard. You really got to just get the plane off the ground and sort of back on the ground, okay, and you're going to be awesome. And then if you want to be a really great fighter pilot, you got to go to 7 or 8 fighter pilot schools that you put yourself through. But we have kind of a minimal plane. If you can take the plane off and you can land the plane, you're good. That's not what we do. That's not how we treat Tier 1 military and special operations people. It's not how we do any of this. And it's not how we do a lot of businesses in the private sector, where I'm sure engineers at Apple are not subscribed to a minimal standard that, hey, we are going to make, we have this like total bottom thing, and that's all you got to do to be successful here. That isn't how it works anywhere else, but we expect that people who are tasked with making life and death split-second decisions, who are then going to be subject to a proctological examination on everything they did, and somehow we think that these shooting courses shot once a year that the rest of the shooting world laughs at is somehow okay. And it's really not. And it comes down to leadership. And it is horribly, horribly lacking, particularly in metropolitan America. I think our rural sheriff's world is probably going to be the saving grace of any level of law enforcement. But certainly what I'm seeing from chiefs of police on TV lately is disturbing at best, and the citizenry should be worried.
Hey, I just wanted to make a quick comment before we circle back to Lee and his 2 pieces of good news he has. I remember when I was a child, my grandfather, who was a military police officer in World War II for the U.S. Army, he told me something that I didn't get when I was a kid. And he said, every soldier who's out in the battlefield, that's 7 people supporting that person. And so you hit the nail, DB, big time with that. Go ahead, Lee.
Well, just one quick thing on the culture thing. I don't know what the numbers are nationwide, but in Georgia, the average tenure of a police chief is 2 years. The average tenure of a sheriff is 18 years.
Wow.
And the sheriff in Georgia is a constitutional officer. He is not, or she, we've got 3 female sheriffs right now, are not employees of the county government. The county commission has no supervisory authority over us whatsoever. The chairman or the mayor, if you want to use that term, could come out and issue an order to give them room to let them burn and all that kind of stuff. And we'd say, no, we don't work for you. We're going to uphold law and order. And there's nothing they can do to us because we don't work for them. We work for the electorate. And that same thing actually applies to the other constitutional officers in Georgia, not just the sheriff. Earlier, we talked about some positive things, and just a couple of things I would like to interject here. We're seeing more modular firearms come available on the market right now. I'm not going to say better firearms. from Wayne and Daryl's day, but more modular firearms.
Yep.
My first issued handgun was a Smith & Wesson 4006. If it fits you, great. If it didn't fit you, too bad. Then we went to third generation Glock 22s, same thing. Now I've gotten to make a purchasing decision. I put our agency in Gen 4 17s. If I was doing it today, it'd be Gen 5s. Well, you can change the back straps and make the gun fit the hands more readily. So if you have someone with smaller hands that are struggling with this big, huge gun, you can make some changes to the gun and still be in kind of a standard format. Now, I personally, I think I've told this story in here before. I had a female jailer that I wanted to go to the academy because I wanted to promote her, and she was scared of the firearms, and the Gen 4 17s were just too big for her hands. Well, I brought in a Smith & Wesson Shield. It fit her hands. She could handle it. We took her down to the range. She shot better. And I said, well, run out to the cop store and buy her a shield. They're like, you would do that? I said, $350 for a good sergeant? Absolutely. I'll spend $350 to do that. So I think we're seeing a positive move from the gear in that standpoint. I think the other thing would be the rapid acceptance of patrol rifles that are becoming available. In 1999, it was unheard of to see a rifle in a lot of patrol cars. Shotguns were pretty regular, but they were all cylinder bore, bead sight, and they had 4 rounds of buckshot in them. Now we're seeing the more advent of the patrol rifles, which will be more user-friendly across the board. We can argue about effectiveness at close ranges, but I think there's no argument that it's easier to train on the rifle and that they are more effective across the board. So that's 2 things that I think we're seeing positive for officers out there.
So I was thinking about something. This has been interesting, and Tatiana, you talking about firearms training and trying to stay on track here. I don't know what the factors will have to be as far as the moon and the stars and the planets lining up to do a return to viable firearms training. And I would say that as a culture, as a so-called profession across the country, we've never had a season of really top-end firearms training across the majority of the country. It's always been very locally based and driven, usually personality driven, by people that cared and had a little bit of traction inside their agency. The stellar example on that, I guess, would be LAPD, Daryl, from the guys that in the 70s and early 80s that went to Gunsight from D Platoon and came back and started proliferating the modern technique all over LAPD. And whether you like the modern technique or not, it is a very structured and useful and fairly easy to teach program. So we've never done it nationwide. I don't know if we ever will, but I think there's going to be a new impetus for us for this in about 5 to 10 years, because given what we're seeing on the upheaval, the politics, the finances, everything like that, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, probably sooner, but 5 years to be safe, we're going to see an unseen in the past explosion of violent crime in the United States. And it's gonna victimize our citizens. We're gonna see murder rates go up. We're gonna see robbery rates go through the roof. We're gonna see officer killings and assaults go up. And at that point, if you can have a few people that are influential and are willing to step out on a plank and say, hey, we've got to do something, then you may see a resurgence. But we're going to have to get a lot worse before we decide to get a lot better, is the path I think we're on.
Yeah, there are 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, and there's no single controlling authority.
That's right.
For all of them. Each state has its own either Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, which you'll hear us frequently refer to as POST, or some of the states, they call it a Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training, and it becomes CLEAT. I think in Texas you have TCOL. Which is just another
Texas
acronym.
Commission on Law Enforcement.
All right, so each state has some sort of entity in that regard that sets standards and training for their state, but those are the minimum standards and training for their state. But there is no single, okay, all 18,000 of you are going to get on this same page. It just
and kind of along with that, what Wayne said is a lot of this is going to be individual personalities driven at individual agencies. A lot of that golden era of LAPD stuff is gone, and now when they're cutting their budget and defunding them, where do you think the first cuts are going to be? Now, they got rid of a lot of that stuff as soon as those guys left. I know before I even retired, it took a captain 6 months to dismantle pretty much everything I had done over the previous 20 years. And, it's because, again, it's expensive and it's hard to do. And, one of the best things I ever did is working with a lieutenant at my agency is we actually made policy that it was now that we could actually fire veteran police officers for inability to qualify and put a structure in that. Prior to that, we had officers who simply didn't care, couldn't shoot, were horrible, and they'd get assigned a firearms instructor. You go through a case of ammo trying to get them to do a minimal qualification, and you did this every qual, and there was no penalty for that. And in a lot of agencies, that what they've simply done is it's just easier to lower the standards. I mean, Wayne and I started, and we had to qualify. I mean, we started in the academy. We're shooting at 50 yards, and then we had 25 yards the entire time I was there. A lot of agencies have completely gone away from 25 yards, and 15 yards is their long, extended range difference, where you might fire a few shots at 15, and then they get into these incidents and they can't figure out what's wrong. Well, what's wrong is, again, on one-dimensional paper targets on a range where officers are standing toe to toe, they've got their toes on a line because it would be unsafe to have them moving, and they're going into a cold facility coming off. We like I said, they make a lot of these large agency facilities extremely safe for the range staff, but they're not doing anything very realistic. And that's a lot of and I am completely empathetic to those staffs because, for example, at New York PD, how do you want to qualify 40,000 cops? What do you think that's looking like? LAPD, what's it like qualifying 10,000 officers? We did my agency, we had a couple hundred officers. We didn't have a full-time range staff. You were doing that as collateral duty. I mean, it was a nightmare trying to get these people qualified and then trying to actually care and set standards, and then having to put the work in to have people meet standards was very, very difficult. You can do it, but it's hard, and it takes work, and it takes the right personnel. That's another problem. Do you think being the super gun person at a police agency right now is anything anybody wants to be? Or do you think they put those people working the range? Do you think that's a good, that's, believe me, you don't want to be identified as a gun person. I mean, I'll admit something on the air. When I took the psychological test for my agency, I pretended I was my brother. I answered all the questions how I thought Wayne knows my brother, so that makes it extra funny. Is they didn't really hire what they thought they were hiring, but I passed being my brother. And, I was sitting there thinking, how would my brother answer this question? That's how I did the whole psych test. And again, you get labeled and you get made fun of being the gun guy at a lot of these agencies, and it's not a popular thing. And, you would think that, and, again, this is era stuff. I'm a big collector of Depression era police guns, and the study of police training history is where my place in the industry now is. And, it used to be, I remember in the lobby of my police department, there was a gigantic shooting trophies prominently displayed in the lobby of the department. They were from the 1950s. And I was in trouble. I won the county Top Gun shoot. It's the first time it had happened at my agency in 40 years. And unfortunately, at the time, I was banned from representing the department in competition. So that trophy stayed at my house instead of being in the lobby of the department because our agency hadn't beaten the sheriff's department in 40 years. And, but that was a big problem.
Score one for the superiority of deputies over city police.
Right. That's true.
and then every so often, but you know what it is? It's because they were the one who hosted it. that always helps when it's a hometown thing and you set the courses up in practice. But, that used to be a big deal. Those competitions between the police and the county sheriffs and shooting stuff, I had an uncle who was the range guy in the Canal Zone Police Department in Panama. The shooting competitions, all the families would come out for picnics, and it was a big deal back in the 50s and 60s and prior to that. Well, we've lost a lot of that. How many people at agencies are coming out to watch? Who's bringing the family out for a picnic for watching the shooting competition at the police department? I mean, we're laughing about it. That's unheard of now, but that used to be a big deal. And those competitions, I mean, who ruled the roost in PPC? Back when I started, that was a big deal. Being a governor's 20 shooter was a huge. If you had one of the top PPC shooters at your department, that was a huge, huge deal. Does anybody really care now? Do you have many metropolitan chiefs of police who are putting a ton of work into making sure their agency is the top shooting team in the country? I don't think that's anybody's real priority right now.
No, you know what's funny? I was going to say that back to what Alan was saying about the standards and stuff. Like Alan had a visitor, looks like a crook. Okay, it was a raccoon. And Alan hit him at like 25 yards the other night. I had a terrorist groundhog that I pulled out of my freaking garage, and he's standing about 30 yards, stands up, looks at me, put him down with my Glock 17. I mean, those are easy shots that Alan and I could make. Like just, doing whatever we're doing. So yeah, those quals, they need to definitely step them up. T?
So I see a lot of folks come through my classes, and when you've worked with enough people of different cultures, you kind of know who they are. They won't say who they are, but you can tell. There's enough of their mannerisms and what they choose to say or how delicate they are dancing around certain topics. But most folks do not want their classmates to know that they're a police officer who's there on their own dime, on their own time, investing in a class. And they certainly don't want any of their peers to know. And they really, really don't want, and they will, do the I'm going to bow out of the class photo, because they don't want their image out there, whether their name's attached to it or not, because someone's going to find it in the Google image search, right, of their face. So there's a huge stigma, and is that preventing good guys from going out and seeking this stuff out? I mean, there's the question of, okay, I'm supposed to be a cop. I'm basically supposed to be a Navy SEAL in the eyes of my constituency, right? And I'm worried. I'm here because I'm not. I'm trying to get closer to that. But the assumption is I've got to be top shooter if people know I'm a cop.
Well,
but they're there because that's what they're there for, but they don't want anybody to know.
Tatiana,
talk to us a little bit about that.
It's been building for a while. There is a situation where a lot of agencies promulgate policy, rules, etc., that specifically prohibit their officers from going out and getting the training. Minneapolis, of course, that's turned into a complete train wreck in the past 6 or 8 weeks. They put out I think the city council put the policy out that none of their personnel they called it warrior training.
Yeah.
Can go to any kind of outside the department warrior training, and I think they specifically constrain the department from putting on anything. It sounds like what they're going to do is very, very minimal check the box stuff. So yeah, there's a bunch of them that the policy is constraining them. There's others, and I haven't seen too many that don't want to acknowledge that they're a law enforcement officer, but I can see where that's a problem.
There was a female Los Angeles police officer that was recently involved in a shooting, and there's been a lawsuit filed. Well, it turns out she's a competition shooter. She's trained with Terran Tactical, and the lawsuit is that she's trained as this competition shooter. Her first reaction is just going to go out to burn them down and not think about what she's doing. Well, if you watch the video of the shooting, every shot she fired was a deliberate shot. I'm talking about, it was beautiful. There was no emotion in her shooting whatsoever. It was all
6 for 6.
Yeah,
they were textbook paced controlled pairs.
They were all in a logical mind, probably 0.5, 0.6 splits. Wouldn't you think, guys?
Yep,
something
they were
like
all
that.
assessed, perfectly paced shots.
I was curious, so I Googled her, and I found a video of her shooting at Terran Tactical, and she went through a still course probably at about 0.25 splits. Okay, I want to be the expert witness in this case. I would actually go to California for this on my own dime, just to play these 2 videos and go, okay, here's how she shoots when she's not making decisions. So let's just go as fast as you can go and burn it down. And here's how she shoots when she's having to make decisions. And just send the case to the jury right then.
I don't know if this is true or not, but my understanding is she's also a multi-generational
Yeah. Her
officer.
father.
I heard it goes back even further than that.
Yeah.
And if they come back, she's been immersed in sort of that old school LA, shooting program, is exceptional. I mean, it was a very good job, and it wasn't emotional, and it's not, I'm just going to smack that trigger as fast as I can, as hard as I can, and hope good things happen. I mean, we wish we could get all of our people to shoot at that kind of level of control and assessment. It's what Wayne and I call assessment speed as opposed to emotional speed. And, that's what your goal is. But I'll tell you what, I guarantee you a lot of that skill did not come from qualification, although it's obvious that she's been immersed in the LAPD way of doing things.
Yeah.
On the performance, that was sort of the past that legacy was built on. But that's, again, if you want to put the work in, the problem is she shouldn't have had to go to outside the agency for that. That should be what we're, and it goes to prove, you always hear, oh, well, we're having to lower the standards because we have, women now, and we have minorities from cultures that are not coming from gun cultures, and we don't have, and it's all a bunch of, hooey, because I don't care who you are, good instructors can teach good students how to shoot. And how to shoot great if they want to. That's not what the problem is. The problem is that we're not investing the time, money, and effort into giving the instructors the resources. Sending, who should be going to all these big shooting schools is the instructors. That's not happening.
Yeah.
We send them to an 80-hour school and tell them they're an instructor, and they're done. They never go to another school again. That ain't how it works. That's not. All of us here who are instructors, that's not what we do. We've got, I just turned my resume in the other day to somebody. It's 7 pages, single-spaced pages of mostly shooting schools. My agency didn't send me to those, but is that the way it should be? That's not the way it should be. And
No,
smaller agencies, believe me, that's not happening. With the
That's true.
instructors doing the work.
That's another aspect of all of this with the mediocrity is an organizational incestuousness to the training. You send the guy, and it takes 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, as far as a norm. And in police work, at least in Texas, and I suspect everywhere else, so you have a topic. Let's just say firearms. Well, you go to basic firearms for a week, and then a few months later, you go to intermediate firearms for a week, and then you go to advanced firearms for another week, and then you go to firearms instructor school and general instructor school. So in Texas, you at that point have 5 weeks invested, and you are then knighted and designated as a subject matter expert. And I submit to you that there's no way that you can say that person is qualified to develop policy, to deliver training, to develop training, but that is the model that's going up. That's what's going on in many, many places.
So before we run out of time, I wanted to make sure and ask one of you something, and that is Lee. Let's say
kind
that.
of to comment on that. I mean, it's like when we, when you see, and I don't want to harp too hard on this. I'm feeling like kind of Pat right now, but it's like when you see somebody who says, well, I have an NRA basic firearms instructor. I'm an NRA certified instructor. And that's all they've ever done. How good do you think the firearms instruction is going to be compared to what we're used to from the top tier level instructors? Well, we're doing that in law enforcement. A lot of these police instructors have a state minimum instructor school certificate, and a lot of them are old. A lot of them are outdated. I mean, they haven't been to anything else in years. And it goes back to that ego thing. Is a lot of just by nature of sort of what cops are, is it's hard to go in and get crushed. I mean, it was hard for me as a 24-year-old kid who was the best shooter at my department. That's how I got the SWAT firearms instructor job. And, you know, I was always a top shooter around the people I worked with. I went out to LAPD D platoon and was embarrassed in my performance. I couldn't pass their pistol qual course. I was close. I could pass the MP5. I did real well on the shotgun, but I mean, I could not pass their pistol course because it was so difficult. And I came back and I implemented that as this is our new standard. And all my guys were mad because they're like, well, it's really hard. And those guys are a full-time SWAT team. Well, you know, the crooks don't know, you know, they're not gonna give you a lesser game because you're a part-time team. You know, that's what the standard is, and that's what we're going to adapt to. But if you don't go out and challenge yourself to not be to where you're going to be terrible, and, you know, kind of like what Tatiana was talking about, a lot of those officers, you know, their ego's on the line. All those other people in class sort of expect them to be exceptional shooters because that's what the, you know, TV, media, movies has portrayed them as, and it's not true. You know, Wayne and I don't face a lot of that because, you know, most people know our background. So when we get law enforcement officers who are coming to our classes, it's kind of like we're going to the home team, and they're going to try and make me better without judging me. And most of our students are on the same program but just showing up in a you know, citizen-centric class is hard for officers to do because you're going to go out there, for many of them, they're just going to go out and get spanked. And they got to put their ego on the line to do it. And that's not something that gets sold into many of these things. And again, it's a failure of leadership where, you know, I would be proud as a chief of police. And I know Lee is, you know, a chief deputy is his agency. I think Lee would want his officers going into schools and being the top shooters. And he's going to make sure his guys are doing that.
And
Well,
they are.
that's kind of where.
But he is an anomaly. You know,
that's kind of where where I wanted to go.
I went to me and a couple. Of
I
my
don't think
guys
DB can hear you, Alan.
What?
I don't think he can hear you. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I was saying that's where I wanted to go with the question.
Hold on a minute.
Yep, that's what I thought. Yep, you can't hear us, DB, because we.
Hold on. Hold
All right.
on.
All right, just pause for a second, DB. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, so where I wanted to go with the question before we ended this is that let's say that, you know, 5% of the.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. You led me to a question that I had
Alan?
for Lee was, let's say that, you know, 5% of the officers are the type of
technical
shooters
difficulties
that we're talking about here. Lee, you're kind of
there.
I can hear you. You kind of
mute him.
You kind of got more than your share of that kind of shooter, I think. So how have you guys successfully
You're killing me.
developed the shooters that you have?
I'm gonna wait and let Daryl answer that for me.
DB, hold on, brother. Hold on. Go ahead, Lee.
Okay, I think the question was getting the agency shooters to improve and wanting to have the best guys out there.
Basically, I want you to brag a little bit on what you guys have accomplished
can you hear
with
me?
your place.
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you, DB.
Okay. Now I can hear you. I was plugged into power because I was losing it, but now I got you. Okay.
All right. So hold on. Stand by, DB. Hold on. Please answer your question.
Probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with the casino drill, and I've talked about this previously. Now 4 of the top 5 scores on the casino are my guys.
Right.
And I'm not one of them.
Right.
I'm not one of those top 4, if that tells you how good our guys are. The current tied for number 1 guy just got elected sheriff of my county where I work, and will be taking over as sheriff on January 1st. So I know my training program's not going to get dismantled because he's a product of it and of his own hard work as well. We take great pride in it. There was a mention of multi-agency firearms competitions earlier. I was given orders one time to take a team to another county's pistol match, and we were not allowed to come back unless we won it. And so we went over and we took every trophy. And the next year when they had it, they didn't send us the invitation because they're going to come do it again. We kind of take great pride in that stuff. And that stems from kind of the culture that my boss came up in. Like I said, he's been a peace officer since 1978. We used to have, this is the 10th Congressional District of Georgia. We used to have 10th Congressional District law enforcement matches. If your agency was in the Congressional District, there was an annual match each year. And it was big deal bragging rights. The agency that I started with won so many matches that they quit having the match.
And that's what needs to happen. That's what, when Wayne talks about the, everybody gets a trophy thing, that's the problem.
Yeah.
If you want to get better, you're going to have to work, and competition's a great thing. But again, this gets back to the cultural thing we're going to be talking about next episode about some of the rural stuff versus the metropolitan stuff. I don't see a lot of chiefs of police of a large agency going out and challenging the local sheriff to, my guys are going to kick your tail all over the place on the next big, shooting match. How much do you think that's getting discussed anymore in the metropolitan police departments?
Oh, I don't think it is at all.
Well, I'll tell you what, between LAPD and LA sheriffs, that used to be a thing. San Diego PD, San Diego sheriffs, all those places in my area, that was a big, big deal. That's not anymore.
Right. One thing I think we need to mention about LAPD and their firearms training, I think the hallmark of their training was the recency that they put an emphasis on. Mm-hmm. Their frequency, they got people onto the range. If they didn't go out and do but fire a box of ammo under controlled conditions, running through a qual course or running through some sort of training program, it kept their guys at least at a standard, a proficient level. Versus this, you go out once a year and you shoot your qual course. And I think, you come out of the academy, you've had recent training, if you can keep those standards going. So one of the things we're in the process of adopting with us is, now that I've got some line level guys that have been to the firearms instructor school, they're about to go through the range master's instructor program, is I've tasked them with developing 50 round lesson plans. So that I've got 2 corporals that are on patrol, and their job is going to be, as they go to the range near the end of, say, day shift, and they start calling down all the day shift officers one at a time and running them through a 50 round course of fire and then sending them back out on patrol. And then they catch the night shift guys as they come in and start doing the same thing when we can during daylight savings time. And just so that there's a recency, and I want them to start doing this once a month. And because I think we've built our skill level to a certain thing that we need to do more to maintain those levels and get the frequency of training. I'd love to hear Wayne and Daryl's thought on that.
Well, there's.
I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think monthly and frequency is huge, and that is, so let's kind of transition this into what can be done. Frequency is one of those big ones. I'm sure this is kind of where Wayne was going. One of the big things we had heard about, one of the reasons the guys at LAPD SAS are so good is they were legendary for at least running by the academy once a week and shooting the bonus course, which is very, very difficult shooting course. But it's not a lot of rounds. 30 rounds?
40.
40 rounds they're getting in once a week. And, for I was shooting daily at my department, but our qualification when I started was 30 rounds a month. It's not a huge round count, but you're at least doing it every month. And most of the people, because it was a bullseye course, were at least practicing as well. So it was very common to see guys in the range at end of watch. So I think if we can get to the point where, again, Lee's on the right track, if we had a 1 box of ammo class or qual course that was a realistic, covered a lot of bases qual course, well thought out qual course, and we could get everybody out once a month to shoot that 50 rounds, is a huge benefit over once a year. I mean, how good would any of us shoot if all we shot was once a year? And see, a lot of these officers are under the impression, well, if I needed to shoot more than once a year, the agency would send me more than once a year. But obviously they think this is all that's necessary. And the shooting courses are set up that you can pass them by shooting them once a year. Now think about a shooting course design that you can pass one time a year, on what that's going to look like for all of us if we didn't do anything for a year and then stepped on to qualify. What would that course look like? That's what we have. Versus if we did something that was a qualification that was done monthly, is a whole different ballgame.
Let's get Wayne
quickly
real quick,
address
and
problems.
we got to wrap up there.
That gets part of the retention and training. Is if one of Lee's instructors, if you're shooting people once a month, you're going to start seeing problems that need to get addressed through additional training or counseling.
Cool. Let's get Wayne real quick, and then we got to wrap up.
Okay. Recency of training is important. It's probably more important than quantity of rounds fired, and that is how frequent you're doing it. Too quick. Well, Daryl took one of the examples, LAPD SIS, shooting once a week on bonus course. 40 rounds, takes about 5 minutes to run it. Tough course if you shoot it on the target you're supposed to at the time you're supposed to. Another one, a legacy guy that was very, very good in fights and practiced every day, a guy named James Butler Hickok, also known as Wild Bill, carried 2 Colt Navies, loaded 5 rounds each every day. Get up when he got over his hangover, and shoot 5 rounds in practice, clean the pistol, put a fresh load on it as a cap and ball revolver, and then shoot the other one 10 rounds or 5 rounds and clean and reload it. And the recency, if just doing a little bit every day, is more critical than saying I'm going to do 500 rounds once a year in some kind of training. I don't think you don't get the traction, you don't get the benefit that you would from doing something every day, every week, every month. Thanks, man.
Cool. So here we go. What does everybody have going on? Daryl, what do you got going on? Where can people get a hold of you?
Not much. DB Shooting Adventures is sort of my Facebook thing. Anybody who was friends with me noticed I cleansed my Facebook profile personally. I was getting stalked by some Antifa people and basically had to can everything. So there's that. Wayne and I have a Revolver Roundup coming up in November. It's sold out, but it'll be fun. And then trying to get set up for upcoming stuff. So, yeah, that's about it.
Lee, what do you got? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say I've been busy. I knew this was going to happen, and I suspect everybody, Tatiana, Lee, I've been getting hit up by new folks wanting to learn how to shoot. And so what I have been doing is, from the standpoint of scheduling and not wearing people out, is I've been doing a lot of 2-hour sessions with people, teaching them safety and fundamentals. And it's astounding. It's astounding how well they do with that 2 hours of directed training one-on-one. And that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, I'll be announcing some courses I'm going to do 2 in September and probably 1 in October. I'll have those up on the firstpersonsafety.com webpage and Facebook and Eventbrite pages probably within the week. They'll be in Watkinsville, Georgia. As Wayne was saying, there are a lot of new people coming out. I'm getting inundated with requests for training, but I'm having a difficult time getting access to ranges. And probably range access is probably the biggest enemy to firearms ownership that we're going to have over the next generation or two. Just as the ability to be able to go out and shoot vanishes. And we're just going to raise more and more people that they have no connection to it whatsoever. I think Steve Anderson made that point months ago when he was on the show. And he talked about the difference between anti-gun people and non-gun people. And right now we've got a lot of non-gun people that are they're opening up and embracing guns, but they're just not being able to get the access to the ranges. And then November, the Range Master Firearms Instructor Reunion will be at Boondocks in Mississippi, and we're going to run a very interesting test at that event that's going to be probably going to turn some people on their ear when they learn the results of it. I think it's going to be pretty interesting in the firearms training world, and it's not hard. It's a 2-shot test.
So I tell you what I'm finding out to be the worst thing about people that want to learn to shoot or get used to shooting. They never seem to have any ammo, and at this time, the way the state of things are now, they're not the best people to have around sometimes. But
I just build the ammo cost into what I'm charging them. Because
Yeah,
I've
well,
That's
you
got
what we're
plenty.
doing.
here out. Yeah, we've got it, but yeah. So T, what do you got going on, and where can people get a hold of you?
Much like Wayne, I'm inundated with brand new
T, you.
shooters. Can you hear me? I'm not on mute.
Yeah, here we get you.
Okay. All right.
Yep,
Phew,
now
just
we
making
can.
sure I clicked the button.
Yes, no, you're good now. You're good.
Yeah, much like Wayne, I'm being inundated with new shooters. We're getting flooded with them at our home range up here in Maine, Howell's Gun Shop. And we cannot keep programs on the books fast enough. They're selling out 60 days in advance. So I'm bringing on additional staffing, getting them trained up, and we're adding as many private lessons and programs as we can. And what we're doing is we're providing the firearms, we're providing the ammunition, we're creating an opportunity for a safe, structured, rapid assimilation into creating range-safe shooters. And that is our goal,
Nice.
range-safe shooters, and impressing upon them what their next steps are based on their goals. And we're finding that people are, for the first time, actually almost instantly before they leave the premises, signing up for that next class. So we're not seeing that 2%, maybe they'll come back in 6 months, but people are committed to this now in a way that they haven't been in the past because the need and the concerns are real. So the programs in Maine are at howellsgunshop.com. And then my programs are picking up this weekend. Throughout the rest of this year, I'm going to hit the road pretty hard again. And there are some openings still left. If you're interested, check them out at TatianaWhitlock.com.
All right, perfect, folks. Alan, you got any more IDPA matches coming up after you crush that last one, brother? I want to see a repeat.
next, not this coming week, but next week. Yeah.
Nice. All right, well, bring it home, brother. Folks who've inquired about our CCR t-shirts, we're not selling them anymore. We have a few left. We have in stock currently 4 largest, 2 XL largest. Just send me www.paypal.me/DC radio, $20. And leave your size and your address in the comments. To become a corporate sponsor or to advertise on the show, please send me an email to baraka3@gmail.com for details. Please share, subscribe, leave your feedback by commenting at the bottom of this YouTube video. If you are watching through YouTube, if you're watching through Facebook, please head on over, give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Please go to Google and type in Civilian Carry Radio to find our home on Firearms Radio Network. It's not a friendly URL. That's why I have you do that there. We have our full show notes there. We have a truncated version in the description under the YouTube video. You will find there our website address, our Twitter, our Instagram, our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and 9 out of the 137 audio podcasting stations, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podbean, OnSpeaker, Player FM, and just basically go to your favorite podcasting station, type in Civilian Carry Radio. You also find a list of our industry partners, discounts, Aridus Industries, ATI, Battle Comp, Big Tex Outdoors, Dark Angel Medical, Dark Star Gear Holsters, Fire Clean, and Trident Concepts. Please join us next Wednesday for our 155th episode where we feature Miss Kristen DeBucker, 20-year martial artist, BJJ black belt directly under Master Pedro Sauer and owner of Universal Self-Defense. And our guest co-host will be my current professor, Mr. Marco Moreno, and Brian Hill. Behind that, we have the next installment of this show. Part 4, guest hosts are DB, Chuck Haggard, and Wayne Dobbs. Behind that, we have our 3-part of our 6-part Flirting with Disaster. Part 3, True Colors, and Abuser Revealed, the transformation after marriage to an abusive relationship. Behind that, we have Brian and Shelley Hill coming to talk about image-based decisions and making drills. And behind that, we have part 5 of reality of police training, and that will be DB, Lee, and Akil. As always, please check out DC Project Rally for Gun Rights, www.dcproject.info. Tatiana is our main representative out of the 50 states, and they are doing great work over there trying to talk to the legislative people about and educating them about guns. Folks, please check out our announcement section for the 24-hour crisis hotline at 800-799-7233. And from there, let's go to final thoughts. Alan.
Yeah, I guess, on this subject with this panel, I guess before this whole show is over, before the series is over, we need to have a serious conversation, get some advice from you guys about, what people like us can do as citizens to try to change things in our areas and our departments and stuff like that. Who we need to write to, who we need to talk to, because aside from all these defunding movements and stuff like that, I just see this job as becoming increasingly unappealing to people that you want to have these jobs. I mean, if they don't force them out with the defunding, I think they're going to make the job just too unappealing, and we're going to be we're all going to suffer for it. So I think all of us out here in podcast land need to think about what it is we can do to let our officers know that we support them and we appreciate what they're doing, and B, try to figure out some way to get the powers that be to change this stuff. That's it.
Well said and amen. Tatiana, final thoughts.
Well, thank you all for coming on and making a lot of these concepts palatable for those of our listeners who are not from this space. And I know that this series is one that I'd like to share with a lot of folks who are now active on their town and city councils, thinking they know better and how to implement those budgets and where to make the cuts. Because with a lot of these concepts comes some very harsh realities of exactly what kind of person with what kind of skill sets would you want to have there to save you if you needed them. And what we need to do to make sure we shore up those individuals with the right tools to be successful and keep them out of harm's way as well. So thank you for participating in this series.
Oh, very, very well said. And thank you so much for that, Tatiana. I was going to ask you also, please tell people about your upcoming with Michael and Chuck, please.
I'm sorry?
I my internet connection is really horrible right now. I wanted you to plug your Sunday show on the radio. I'm sorry. I didn't say that well. I didn't say it well.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So when Responsibly Armed Radio, this past Sunday's show had Chuck Haggard and Mike Treat, and we talked about appropriate and useful tools throughout we broke it down into 4 stages of escalation of force and what you need to have for soft skills and hardware to be successful throughout those different types of encounters.
Yes, so folks,
and that information can be found at responsiblyarmedradio.com.
There we go. That's what I was looking for. All right, awesome. All right, Wayne Dobbs, final thoughts, brother.
I think we're going to get a lot worse before we get a lot better. I think that we need to figure out how we can market this problem to our communities and seek some cooperation with them to solve them. And I think we're going to need to do some out-of-the-box thinking. I think the incestuous 90-day wonder trainers and training programs need to be viewed with a really, really critical eye, and perhaps say, hey, we're going to look for professional firearms trainers and we're going to outsource it. I know that's probably radical and will be a difficult haul, but it's just like saying, hey, I read a couple of medical books, so I think I'll treat myself when I'm ill. I think that's parallel with what we're doing in police work on our training.
All right, Lee Weems, final thoughts, brother.
As a student of history, I used to wonder how Custer could have ridden up on all of those Indians out in the Great Plains. And it's the middle, it's nothing. There's no trees, it's barren land. How could you have just ridden up on thousands of Indians? Until I went to the battlefield and looked at the geography. And you could have hidden thousands and thousands of people out there and approached them and never known you were doing it until it was too late, which is pretty much what happened. Of course, he ignored the advice of his scouts that were telling him the truth. But I want to draw a modern parallel to that. I used to wonder how someone like Hitler and Mussolini could come to power. But when I look at the last century, you had the Great War, because it wasn't World War I until we had World War II. You had the Great War from 1914 to 1918, followed by a Spanish flu pandemic, followed by a massive economic depression. The only thing we're missing right now is the massive economic depression, and we're trying to self-inflict that on ourselves right now. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, I wondered how it could happen to Custer until I saw the geography myself. Well, now I'm seeing the geography myself on how just a nation could descend to the point that it would elect someone like that as leader. And I'm not drawing a parallel to any candidate now. I think our one saving grace in America is our constitutional form of government, in which the powers are divided amongst three branches instead of like it was in Europe and many of the countries there, where you had a parliamentary system where the executive branch and the legislative branch were the same. Yeah, Hitler was actually elected into office, but he was elected with like 30% of the vote. And the way it happens in parliamentary systems is usually there's so many parties that no one party wins a majority. And so you get the party that wins the plurality of votes gets to form a coalition government. And that's how Hitler rose to power. He was never elected by a majority of Germans, but he was elected by a plurality of Germans. And if you look at what's going on now, if we had such a system like that here in America, you could see the Antifa party. You could see, some of these other fringe fraction parties split off into enough where get our vote divided into so many small fractions that we ended up forming a coalition government. We're right politically for something like that to happen if our system would allow it. Thankfully, we have a chief executive that's elected separately from the legislature, and we have a two-house legislature instead of a unicameral. And I think our system is going to prevent that for the most part from happening. But man, to see it happening in my own life, because we'll never see anything like that again. We're seeing something like that again, and it's scary to see how quickly we descended into that.
Amen. And before I pass off to our last guest, which is DB, I would like to say, folks, again, we have we're in a place in our country that I've never felt. I'm a very intuitive, and I'm a very spiritual person, and I feel so much negativity these times. Stop feeding into it, folks. Fight it back. Stop complaining every chance you get. Stop always putting negativity out into the ether, because it's addicting. One person sees something negative, they post something negative, they continue, and it continues and continues. Be the stopgap. Stop it. Post something positive. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Stay off social media. I've been off of Facebook a lot. I've barely been on there in the last month because it literally started to poison me, and suck the life out of me from all the amount of negativity I saw. And I just have had no interest in it. So try to be a voice of positive. Try to lift up. For those of you who believe in God, please pray and have faith. Hope comes from faith. And just try to stay positive, folks. This is a weird, uncertain time, and all we can do is take it day by day and be good to each other. All right, DB. Final thoughts, brother.
First, I want to go back and work for Lee.
I want to work for Lee. What are you talking about? Fine.
Yeah.
Shoot.
So that.
With that, I've got 5 deputies out injured right now. I need some good people. So. Yeah. If you are
how close to 200 grand can you get?
If I added all 5 salaries together,
Daryl comes pre-injured for you, Lee. So
yeah, I'm already broken. The reality of this is that what we're highlighting is there's ways to do this correctly, and there's ways not to do this correctly, and like a lot of what's going on in the world, a lot of places are doing this incorrectly, and a few places are doing it correctly. And, for the listeners out there, I'm just going to kind of make a statement here. The finest, best, most balanced, least problem children, the people who you wanted in your community as police officers, I tended to find were also exceptional on the range. And we have a general idea that if officers take their shooting skills, their deadly force skills, their use of force skills very seriously, that they'll want to use them. The reality is they build the confidence that they don't have to use them.
That's right.
And what you're seeing with a lot of the negative actions that bring media attention to law enforcement, it comes from something we in the business call fear biters. And these are a lot of subpar trained, subpar hired, scared to death people who are finding themselves in situations that their agencies did not prepare them for. And that's the problem. It's not the ones who are exceptionally good with their defensive tactics and their use of force and their shooting skills. And the public should be screaming for more better experts in law enforcement or better skill sets in use of force than what they're getting. And that's what needs to happen.
Well said and amen, my brother. Thank you so much, DB. Folks, in the words of our good friend and mentor, Lynn Givens, I do not carry a pistol so I can impose my will on someone else. I carry a pistol so someone cannot impose their will on me. For me, and what I encourage people to do if they're going to carry, is to carry as an act of love. It is not because of fear or hate or anger, but we carry because we love life, we love our families, and that is something worth protecting. By Mr. Tim Reedy. Folks, like I said again, I'm serious about being positive. Positive mindset is everything, especially, like I said, in this day and age, you got to fight it, and fight it hard, folks. Don't sink into it. It's too easy to fall into that black, dark place of despair. Lift each other up, uplift each other. It matters, folks. Please stay positive. Have a good night. Please take care. Stay safe. Be positive. Remain vigilant. We'll see you guys next week. God bless you all and have a good night. Thank you so much.